Welcome everybody. Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are now, as we have an international audience following this webinar. The topic of today is a crucial one for Auroville and for the Earth, the future of water. But first, let's take a moment of silence to call for Mothers and Aurobindo's presence. Thank you. As the development of Auroville is picking up steam, the question of the management of water is all the more important. Today we will address with our panelists the Lake of Matrimondir and how it is revolutionary in its approach to planning water for the city. We will address also water harvesting, purification, storage, and planned ground recharge. We will address why random unplanned surface water catchment are more a problem than a solution for the aquifer and for habitation, and what kind of help can be provided by a desalination plant. Our panelists are Harald Kraft, Michael Bonke, Anupama Kundoo, which is just next to me. That's the reason why you see her name on my screen, and Toby Neuman. I thank you all for joining this webinar, and I thank also Rade and Vladimir, our partner of La Grace, Aurobindo Integral Life Center. If you have questions, please write them in the Q&A box, and if we have time at the end of the webinar, we will answer them. Now I will invite Harald Kraft to shortly present himself and to present how to plan the water for the city. Harald, you have 20 minutes. Thank you.
And Harald, you'll have to, there you go.
Thank you, thank you. I need my expert next to me. I have been working on the water of problems of Auroville for a very long time. And the important development has happened in '92, where we developed a concept for the entire water management system for Auroville, which had been upgraded in 2003 with a pre-feasibility study sponsored by the EU. When I hit as a student Auroville, from the first day I was confronted with the problems of water in Auroville, and my entire study was more or less guided by the problems of Auroville, how to get in the position to solve at least some of the problems. And one of the first moments of solutions was for me in aspiration, where we cleaned up the water supply system as an example, and that has taught me a lot. Now, later on, the situation aggravated, and there were complaints about over-extraction of the groundwater resources and depletion of the groundwater up to, as you can see, 17 meter. And then the news came, saltwater intrusion into the groundwater, into the aquifers, and then I thought that's the end of the development. Auroville will never be built under these circumstances. And I thought Mother has selected a wrong place, and she may have had to be advised from an expert in this area. And while I thought I have to pack my things and go back, and all the work done till that time was a waste, I thought of what would we have to do in order to still survive at this location. And I remember I had done a study on rainwater harvesting for the village of Kulapayam, and with a quick calculation, I could see that the rainfall on the premises of Auroville would be plenty enough to supply at least the water demand for 50,000 people. And as you can see here, we have rainfall in an average year, and we would require only about 15%. And when we take only the city area, then we could supply at least 48%. So on this base, I start developing a system how to manage this water, because we all know the rainfall is in a few days, sometimes in a few weeks, and we have huge runoff to the sea. This has also formed the topography. Now, how can we keep it? And the most simple solution is if we keep it from running off from the premises of Auroville into the sea. But from there, we cannot leave it. It will infiltrate and it will evaporate. So we have to store it, and it cannot be on the surface. So the safest storage is, of course, underground. And therefore, one very important condition has to be there. It should not get wasted back in the sea or into other layers. And then I realized that the geology of Auroville is absolutely in favor for that. The permeable limestone is below sea level, but covered by a clay layer. And on top of it is the sandstone, the red sandstone, where everybody has complained that it has such a low permeability, and it was very difficult to extract water from this place. But as a storage, it is perfect. And then when you think of where is the best place to infiltrate this water into the underground storage, it is, of course, the highest place on the hill. And that would be definitely a lake. So in this case, I realized that the selection of this place is unique. The city can exist as long as there is rainfall, until even if the entire surrounding becomes saline. This place will not become saline because it is above sea level. So finally, I realized that, that this location is absolutely perfect. And the entire design of this city is an absolute marvel. And it has taken me till 92 to realize that. So on this base, I developed a lot of private projects in Germany and in other places of the world. But in 2003, we had the chance to really prove that this concept is feasible. So we had the master plan. As you see, the green belt has 7 topographic drainage areas, and the city has 4 different zones. And well, the rainfall data collected in Auroville showed average rainfall is almost 1,300 millimeter, wet year 2,600, but the dry year is the problem with 626 millimeter of rainfall only. And the evaporation, that what makes you lose the water, is tremendous. 1,500 and in Auroville 1,700 millimeter, much more than what we get from heaven in the normal conditions. Now, 50,000 inhabitants have to be resident, but that is not enough. The industrial zone and all the other zones will have more people to be supplied. The industrial demand, the commercial demand, the hotels, the restaurants, and all the other users. So we have sum up about 17,000 people additionally. So we have to provide water for 67,000 population. Now, do we need drinking water quality for everything? And how much we need? So what is required is that what is shown, the four tops with about 75 liter per capita that gets to the body, that should have drinking water quality. House cleaning, laundry, 25 liter can be met from harvested rainwater, and even the toilet flushing, garden and car washing can, with a total of about 50 liter, that can be met even from recycled wastewater, or all of it from harvested rainwater. So we require about 10,000 cubic meter per day, or 3,600,000 cubic meter per year. Now, from the groundwater, we have to take about 1,800,000 cubic meter a year, and we can supply 75 liter per capita. Now, how much water can we harvest? This is the determined by the topography, 7 catchment areas. And in this catchment area, we have to harvest the entire runoff. So the drainage area is about 500 hectare in the city and 1,500 hectare in the greenbelt, altogether about 2,000 hectare. Now, the main problem as it is the requirement of the vegetation. This is much higher than the requirement of the human being. And when we have a full supply of irrigation water, the potential evapotranspiration, then we are about 5 times higher than the demand for drinking water. But it is sufficient to supply half of it, of the potential evaporation. And we have used this figure to calculate. And that means it's about 1.2 times of the demand of the population. So, but as you see, the irrigation demand in an average year is about 4.5 million. In a dry year, almost 8 million cubic meters. So when we take the wastewater, treat it for reuse, then we have another 3.4 million cubic meters. And still we have to take from the groundwater 1.1 up to 4.5 million cubic meter. So that has to be stored in that red soil. When we take the roofs of the city, 1 million square meter, then we can harvest the annual rain of, and we from 800,000 cubic meter to 1,800,000 cubic meter. But we require a large storage volume, 800 liter per square meter roof area up to 1,200 liter per square meter roof area. And still there will be runoff from the roofs which cannot be harvested. But we would be able to serve at least 46 liter per capita up to, in a wet year, of course, 100 liter per capita. And remember, 75 liter per capita is the drinking water demand. So the harvest of the entire runoff in Auroville from the city area and the green belt varies from 2.8 million up to 8.4 million in a wet year, but the average is 6.5 million. So the water balance is not very fortunate, but still fortunate. We have in a dry year, as you can see, these are the water resources which you have. Reused wastewater for irrigation, and this is the harvest from the roofs, and this is from groundwater. But the demand is much higher, is almost a double. And if we have an average year, we cannot make it for the full supply of the water demand if full irrigation is being asked. Only in the wet year, we have a surplus. And that indicates also that we have to catch even the high runoffs, the wet year runoff in the storages in the green belt and keep it into the underground. So we have then developed a methods how to do that. I will explain you that briefly. This is the buildings with the rooftop. Each one has an underground storage, and from this storage, it supplies that part of the water supply which does not need drinking water quality. The runoff from the city, that has to be caught at the end of the green belt in stormwater retention basins. But before, you have to, it has to have a treatment by at least simple sedimentation. From this basin, the water can be drawn with a rapid sand filtration and pumped back into the artificial water courses in the city green area, in the parks. And again, treated by sedimentation and rapid sand filtration, and then recirculated as long as is required. Now, at the final stage, this water has to get at least a slow sand filtration purification and then pumped into the Matamandia Lake. And the overflow of the Matamandia Lake, or the extraction from this lake, has again go through a filter and then infiltrated to recharge the groundwater. That is for the rainwater. Now, the wastewater from recycled rainwater and from the groundwater has to be treated in a treatment plant with all biological stages and with an extra stage. And then it has to be pumped back into the city as irrigation water and also into the green belt. Now, the infiltrated rainwater in the ground can then be taken by simple wells before it leaves the premises of the city. That is the concept, and it is still above sea level and cannot be polluted by intrusion of seawater, and protected by the clay layer and limestone, which is the main aquifer for the water supply now in Auroville. Now, the problem is, how can we provide the storage in the greenbelt? And there are existing storages. They have to be expanded, extended, and probably also made new one. They are indicated here. And these are a symbol of the water courses within the city and the recirculation system and the final purification before the water is being discharged into the Matramandia Lake. Now, how much is required as storage facility in the greenbelt? That depends on the infiltration capacity around the central lake, around the Matramandia. And that you can see, if we have an infiltration capacity only of 4 million, we need to collect even the wet years runoff. We need about 6 million cubic meter storage capacity. And in an average of 6 million infiltration, it reduces to 4.7. And finally, if we have a maximum infiltration capacity of 8 million, then we only have to provide 4 million capacity in a wet year. We also evaluated the size and the morphology of the lake, which is the final purification stage and also retention basin. And this is what we have concluded. It has about 1.4 million cubic meter and a depth of 10 meters. Now, I just show you the details what we have already designed. In a brief, we have proposed design for the lake. We have designed the water collecting system, stormwater drains, and the water supply system, the irrigation water supply system, and of course the wastewater treatment and the wastewater collection system. So for everything what is required to manage this, we have at least pre-feasibility standard. And what I always told the Aurovillians, the first example, which is almost built as a copy of Auroville, is near Berlin in Teltow. 27 hectares, no runoff. The entire rainwater is being harvested from the roofs in cisterns and from all the other surfaces, either infiltrated and from the asphalt surfaces of the roads, we discharge into the lake, and the overflow of the lake is being infiltrated. And here is the waterworks of the city of Teltow. There the water is being recovered. No? Oh, here. The Chinese have made a small movie on this. 27 hectares only, not 500. These are the cisterns, road which allows infiltration, runoff to the lake from the, these are the purification system, sedimentation basin, operational since 98. Well, faster it's not possible.
Thank you, Harald. Oh, that was very impressive. I'm very impressed by the scale of what needs to be done in Auroville, and also especially by the fact that obviously you have experimented already with it. So now I will, before giving the microphone to Michael, I would ask Vladimir if he can show us the little video that we have done those last days about the development of the lake in Matrimandir. So
Yeah.
Vladimir, could you show it? It's only 3 minutes.
The work that we are doing now since about 2 years, you could call the first phase of the Matrimandir Lake. That consists of the first sector of the lake itself, which is the center line, 110 meters long, about 90 meters wide, and has a deep zone that's 10 meters deep. This is what we call the test lake. Excavation for this is about 80% complete. Now, either side of this test lake is connected to the water channel. The channel forms a complete ring around Matrimandir. It's 7 meters wide, 1 meter deep, and we have almost completed the shaping of the channel, the excavation and shaping. And now in the next weeks we hope that we can place a liner inside to make it waterproof.
This material will do 1 kilometer channel, wide 7 meter and deep 1.5.
It's 2 millimeters thick, and if it is protected properly, it's said to last for 100 years.
By the next summer monsoon time, we hopefully see the channel filled with water. This water will come from as runoff from the inner gardens of Matrimandir itself and the pathways. But the test lake is not yet ready to receive the water until also there the waterproofing has been done. At the moment we still have, since the last heavy winter monsoon, we still have very high groundwater. So there's almost 1.50 meter water standing in the lake, and no matter how much we pump, we always find the next day that the water level has come back. So we have to wait at least another 2 months till the water level has dropped sufficiently. So realistically, the test lake itself will not be finished before next year's summer. I think the lake can have a huge impact on water conservation, also in terms of knowledge and the technologies used, because Tamil Nadu has histories and thousands of years of having artificial lakes to water the paddy fields that fill in the monsoon and then are used in the post-monsoon time. But as far as I know, never a lake this size has been done that then has zero percolation. So it will be very interesting to see how this type of lakes could actually be duplicated in other areas of India.
So just to show you a little bit of image, and Jan and Luca are sharing some of their experience. Now, Michael, if you want to share with us your input and maybe introduce yourself also. Thank you. You have to unmute yourself, Michael.
Okay, can you hear me? I have been working in the water field in Auroville. There are different ways how to approach the problem of providing the water which is required. Harald, he is the specialist for water harvesting. I would set also equally or even more on desalinating water. But the concept of Varuna is a project partly inside Auroville, partly on a private level, but all for Auroville, of course, where we are looking at electricity and water, these two main commodities, and actually they are also linked to each other. And Varuna has developed a water management concept which has a number of parameters. Storing water is a big issue, desalinating water, water harvesting, then treatment of water. Even when you harvest rainwater, you cannot just use it as it is. It has to be treated. So we have in total 7 elements which compose then the total picture of our water management concept. Let's start with the desalination plant. We have got the place at the beach. We have finished the feasibility study, the environmental impact study. We are in the process of getting the permission. The land we have secured now. There was a big issue that the advancing sea may wash the beach away. So we did a lot in the last monsoon to secure the place. We have already brought the pipelines up to about 1 kilometer away from the beach. Now, the plan for our desalination plant is that in the first phase, it is approximately 5,000 cubic meter per day, 5,000 cubic meter of desalinated water. Desalination plant in the traditional way is not very environmentally friendly. It has 3 environmental issues. One is that it consumes a lot of energy. One is that it uses chemicals. And the third and most impacting problem for a desalination plant is that when you press the water through a membrane, because usually it is the reverse osmosis process. So you draw seawater from the sea, and then you press it through a membrane, and on the other side of the membrane, you have the fresh water, and the salt remains before the membrane. So when you do that process, the more salt which accumulates before the membrane, the higher you have to put the pressure to press the water through and to counteract the osmotic pressure. And after, let's say, 1/3 of the water is through, then you have to release the enriched salt water to bring in fresh water, and that salt water, which is called the brine, when you release it back into the sea, it is heavier than ordinary salt water, because salt is heavier than water and it has a higher salt content. And it doesn't contain oxygen anymore, because with that high pressure, all the gases have come out. And that means when you release that, that brine will sink down immediately onto the bottom of the sea and form a carpet. And since it doesn't contain oxygen anymore, it will stifle all the life at the bottom of the sea. Now, there are, of course, ways how to prevent that, but it is with a lot of effort. We have done bathymetric studies, and we have a concept where this is prevented. But if you look, for example, at the desalination plant in Chennai, there is a plant which leaves out approximately 500,000 cubic meter of brine into the sea in one spot, only 200 meters away from the shoreline, and that, of course, is devastating for the whole bay. So we want to set up a desalination plant without using chemicals at all, with green energy. The 5,000 cubic meter, which we would produce eventually every day, 5,000 cubic meter, it takes the electricity of approximately 3 of our windmills. Varuna has 6 windmills. So with 3 windmills, we could run the plant for 5,000 cubic meter. Now, 5,000 cubic meter would give the daily consumption, including watering the gardens, drinking water, everything, for around 15,000 Aurovillians. If it would be only the pure drinking water, it could supply the drinking water even for 50,000 Aurovillians. Now, the desalination plant has quite some advantages compared to the water harvesting. First of all, it is much more economic to in our area. You have to store the water which you harvest fully. That means it rains mostly, 90% of the rainfall falls in monsoon. And then you have to store the water till you use it, and you can utilize your storage only once. So 1 cubic meter of consumed rainwater, harvested water, needs 1 cubic meter of storage. And a cubic meter of storage costs you minimum, even in an open water body, if we calculate the costs of the lake, for example, now the big test pond, then it comes to minimum 1,000 rupees per cubic meter storage, what it costs to create an open water body storage. The cost for a desalination plant per cubic meter per year is only 250 rupees. And the cost of desalinating 1 cubic meter, if we do it with our own energy, will only be 25 rupees. So cost-wise, desalinated water is much cheaper than rainwater harvested and stored water. And environmental-wise, also, it has big advantages. If you harvest rainwater, of course, in Auroville, we will finally have 30% of the area, sealed area, where you have to do something with the rainwater anyway. So this has to be collected, and then we have to store it somewhere and use it. But apart from that, when you try to collect rainwater and do rainwater harvesting, then of course you prevent the water from going into the aquifer. So in the end, the aquifer is deprived from that water, while when we desalinate water, then we bring fresh water into the area. To give you an image of what it means, if we take the whole city area of Auroville, then in 1 year, we would desalinate as much water that you have a 40 centimeter water column on the whole area of the city area of Auroville. So the desalinated water which we bring into the city area, it will be consumed, but then after consuming it, it will go in the underground, in the aquifer. So when we desalinate water, we help to replenish the aquifer, because all the desalinated water will finally go into the groundwater after it's been used, and it will prevent the salinity of groundwater. I think salinity of groundwater is inevitable in our area. In any case, we live right now water-wise on a freshwater bubble below the sea. But since we are extracting more water than what is replenished by the rainfall, the water level will go down and down. It will very soon be everywhere below sea level. And then it is a question of time when salinity comes in. Now, Varuna has not only been looking at the desalination plant, but we have focused on an area north of Matrimandia at the outside of the Greenbelt, where we intend to build a hill with excavated earth from the lake. The lake, if we want to, the lake around Matrimandia, if we want to have it in the size we are building it now, the earth will be 1 million cubic meter, and 1 million cubic meter has to go somewhere. So the mother has said that there would be a hill made with the earth from the excavation of the lake. And there is one area where it fits well, which is the highest area of the Greenbelt. It's only 5 meters below Matrimandia level. And from there, we were thinking of distributing our desalinated water. There we would like to have a water purification plant. There is an area which contains a lot of pebbles. Varuna has purchased 25 acres of land there, partly these pebble banks. And this would be an area where you could very easily integrate purification plants, natural purification ways, that you do something similar like the big test pond. You excavate a place, you foil it, the bottom put foil, then you fill it up with pebbles, you put again a foil on top, then earth, and then you do a plantation on top. And then when you infiltrate water into that underground foiled storage on one side, and you pull it up on the other side, and when the water travels 50 days underground through the pebbles, it becomes drinking water. That is according to law, the German standard. If water travels underground 50 days, then it's drinking water. So from harvested rainwater, you cannot just take it as it is and lead it into the households. If you take water from the Matrimandia Lake, for example, and lead it to the household, if you are lucky, you get some fishes out of your tap in the kitchen, then you can just put it on the stove and boil your fish soup. So you have to do something in between. So the water which you collect from rainwater harvesting, you have to purify it in order to make it drinking water. And this area there, where we think of placing the hill. It is a nice place. It is not yet inhabited. We could have big water storages there, additional water storages. We could have our water purification plants there. And from there, we could distribute the desalinated water into a centralized water distribution system. And we need definitely both. We need rainwater, harvested water, plus desalinated water. Auroville itself may be fed to a relatively big extent by harvested rainwater. But since all the villages around with so many people, there is no way that you could solve the water crisis of the whole area by rainwater harvesting, because the population density around Auroville is much higher than inside Auroville with the Aurovillians. So desalination is a must in addition to rainwater harvesting. And I think if I calculate 30% of the city area rainfall, if we can harvest that much, which already would be a lot, then it would come to more or less the same as what we desalinate. And both together could be then a base for supplying our water demand, as long as the groundwater is still there. Once the salinity hits the groundwater, then we have to step up the desalination plant for sure, because then the situation will change dramatically. So for the lake is, as a research project, quite interesting because it uses the top of the top technology right now in open water storages. We make it 10 meters deep, which is quite deep actually. I don't know of any artificial lake all around our place there, which is that deep. But you can imagine we have 1.3 meter rainfall per year, but we have 1.7 meter evaporation. So we have 40 centimeter more evaporation than rainfall. And if you have an open water body, which is 2 meters deep, then 20% of the water which you store will evaporate per year. If you have it 10 meters deep, then only 4% of the water will evaporate. So the deeper the water storage, the better the cost ratio, the better the effectivity and all that. So a 10-meter deep artificial water body with HDPE foil lining is the most efficient water storage which you could imagine. And this is what we are trying out at Matrimandia, to see what is the technical challenge to build it, how easily can it be maintained, what is the cost and all that. After the Matrimandia Lake is finished, or even after the first section, we will know already much more, and then we can assess the pros and cons of water harvesting and storing versus desalination. And so, but in any case, we have to do both. It's not this or the other, it's this and the other. Okay, so if anybody has some questions, then at the end of the session, let's see, we can go a bit into detail or depth of the various projects.
Fantastic, very interesting, Michael. It was totally fascinating. So many information that I didn't know. If Anupama would like to add, I'll turn the camera. Not this way, this way.
Hi everyone, it's so fantastic, Joel, that you have brought everyone together. I have just been in Harald's office last week, and had some phone calls also with Michael. I think it's really, really nice that we will be able to share all this work with all the people beyond those who have been able to participate today. As to my own area of work regarding water for Auroville, I actually want to just say briefly that I have been in Auroville for 2 decades. I was living here in Auroville from 1990, but many people do not know that in 1992, I had actually worked in Harald Kraft's office for some time, and I had done some drawings for some of his projects. And that influence I had brought back to Auroville. And when I worked and collaborated with Roger Angers, I had always paid attention to the water aspect. And then it was in around 1998, I had done a study for understanding not just how we capture water and gain water either from the sea or from the rain. I was looking at how to save water from urban life. So I realized that the future of water in urban areas will be all the wastewater, around 135 liters per person per day, if you don't count irrigation, is water that is lost. And of course, there are lots of treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants. Also, Harald helped us to build a few different prototypes for that. But I was interested in this in my study, and I had made detailed calculations based on Auroville's density in low-rise and high-rise areas. I calculated how much water can be caught from the roof according to cleanliness. And I put the amount that you can catch from urban areas according to cleanliness. I put that against all the different uses that Harald spoke about, that different cleanlinesses of water. I mean, you need different, cleanliness for drinking, and it goes down up to irrigation. So I had put all that kind of figures and related them. I found out a coefficient of what do you have to multiply to the roof area to find out in cubic meters what you will be able to store for the various tanks you need for the different things. And I realized that if we while we develop the city, if we can totally rely on the number of times the urban waste water will become actually a source of clean water, if we can actually build that into the piping system and the new plumbing that all buildings are going to need, and if we could determine what is the degree of centralization and what is the degree of decentralization for the cost-effective wastewater treatment plants, and how, there are many parallel studies going on in the world that the future of of farming and food is in the city, because in the cities where people live, that's where wastewater will become, after cleaning, a source of providing water. So I was interested in what the losses would be and so on. So in 1998, when I did that study, I had the opportunity to check all those figures with Harald, and I started applying them in some of the buildings. So I realized that I wanted one more study. I wanted to do an actual one-to-one prototype to check the consumption and demand, and be able to, with data loggers, follow that up. Everything didn't happen that we planned, but creativity was designed as an urban eco community to understand the interrelationship and the interdependency of different green infrastructures, from water and wastewater, which is integrally managed, and energy. So we did creativity around, based on that study, 2000 to 2003, around the time when the master plan was being detailed. And I was also part of producing that perspective plan, which a team of us had got approved. So we had thought that the pace would pick up, and Harald had produced this detailed, studies and design proposals on a city level. So my based on my studies, in collaboration with Harald and with Aurobindo on the spot, we did these 2 tests, creativity with a critical mass for I think 50 people, to test what are the consumption and what really happens between what you calculate and what really happens. And we did the town hall complex, where we even harvested water and cleaned it for drinking purposes. So we came to know for public buildings and for residential, more or less what we could count on. And now, where we stand now, I would say that since the Crown Road is being built, I was really nervous if we do not pay attention to some of, we do not integrate some of the things that Harald Kraft had already warned us about, such as road levels, stormwater collection, drainage details. If you just start paving the road without anticipating the future buildings, the plinth levels could be wrong, the road levels could be wrong, where to allow all that future ideas of water to run off, so surface water to run off to the places in the green belt where already tracks are created. We need to have the right positions and the detail for culverts that should happen under the Crown Road. And a lot of those things, we need a lot of things which in many cities in India, we have not anticipated. And we have simultaneously the problem of flooding in monsoon and the problem of water being in short supply, apart from the problem of also quality of water. So I had actually gone to see Harald because I was very concerned that while the Crown Road is being done, one should really have thought the big picture out and simultaneously thought out the small details, because for all of this integrated holistic system to work, there needs to be, all the people taking decisions about infrastructure, road levels, building guidelines, especially guidelines for integrated water and wastewater management has to be made, because we have to shift from the gated community level of water management to the city level management of water. So I'm really eager to see all of this happen, and I see all the different concerns coming together. And I would like to end by saying that I have always been fascinated by Indian water harvesting. There was the systems from the stepped wells to all the temple tanks in Tamil Nadu. And I was fascinated when I came here that, like all the other temple tanks, Matri Mandir also has a temple tank in a way. And the innovative aspect, since we are thinking about it from so many different perspectives, including how urban life nowadays is very polluting compared to those days. So we are concerned about, how water is caught without how the bottom is handled. There are many, many concerns which people don't know about, and they were probably not concerns long ago when our population and our densities were far less. Since Auroville was conceived to now, we have tripled our population in India. So we have a lot of new concerns. So I would just like to end with mentioning a book of Anil Agarwal on India's ancient wisdom with water management. It's called Dying Wisdom. That book had helped me a lot, and I think I would recommend it to everyone. And I'm really looking forward to discussions. I would like to mention that there are questions that may come even beyond today's webinar are very interesting for all of us. They will help all of us to work together and think about things that we may have not thought about, or clarify things that may be, misunderstandings about. Thank you.
Thank you, Anupama. That was also very interesting. Toby, would you like to share your input?
Share the input. First of all, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation, because water is important now and in the future. My name is Toby. I work for the Town Development Council. And we see in and around the council that in the last, let's say, 12 months, there is a new momentum in getting the city built. From all the years I have been in the council, it is really a momentum that people come together, budgets come together in acceleration of the building of the city. That gives challenges. And one of the challenges what we have is that we need a detailed plan to see what is coming where. And I'm happy also to see Anupama here, and not only Anupama, but many more people who are working together to get what we then say in our organization, the DDP, the detailed development plan, to get it going. Just to find out what needs to be done. And it is needed for the land acquisition, it is needed for budgeting, it is needed for a lot of things. In that DDP, infrastructure, and especially water, but also mobility and also other things, plays an important role. Because if you want to grow, not only in people, but also in agriculture, also in industry, also in visitors and tourists, then the water demand, as Harald said, will increase dramatically. Having said this, and looking at the history, how we got the water together, then it was mainly groundwater. Now, we know in Auroville that the beautiful aquifers we have, that Auroville only taps 1 or 2% of the total aquifers. The rest is all outside Auroville. And that makes that our policy to recharge and do something with the aquifers is quite limited. It also shows us that if we develop something in water, that it cannot be seen isolated from Auroville itself. So there are a few challenges, and I will come to more challenges from where we as TDC try to fit in all these problems and challenges in the DDP. Let's go a step further. If you see how Auroville has developed itself, it was community-based, borewell, a sump, and then a few connections. That was in some cases done very well, in some cases with minimum cost. That means that in all those 150 communities what we have, the different water systems are very, very different. Some are quite well, some are leaking like anything, and that we lose 30, 40, even 50% of the water by bad plumbing and that kind of things. And I'm not even talking about the quality of the water, because if a simple hatch is not well made, then immediately the E. coli start and other kind of contamination. So that is not the future of a city of 50,000 people. We need to do something else. And in that discussion, depleting of the aquifers, we see on one side that we have to develop that rainwater, on the other side that we have to develop also desalination. And let's start with the desalination. What Michael said about desalination is all true. We forgot two things what is important for that source. One, rainwater comes or doesn't come, and there is an average, and there are deep points, but to be 100% sure that an amount of rain that falls is what is needed is not there. Desalination is much more controllable. Secondly, the quality of the water. We know all that water is highly, highly regulated on this planet, especially in the more developed countries. And desalination fits therein. It has a history of quite a development. If you compare that with 20, 25 years back, that has no relevance anymore. It is much cheaper. There's less power goes into it. So the membranes are much better. So it is really a good source. So it is rainwater on one side and desalination on the other side, and we call that multi-sourcing. If you look at the future of multi-sourcing, you say, look, desalinated water is drinkable, so that has to go to residents, and rainwater, we should direct that more to agriculture. I mean, it is simple to say, difficult to do, but you see there a direction where that rainwater can be. And that means that if you make this decision, that the whole infrastructure has to be lined out, and then we are in the middle of the DDP again. The same discussion we have in wastewater. soak pit here, soak pit there, leaking, bad quality. Here and there it was well organized, but on the whole, we need to have a system that works and is hygienic. Again, here's also a lot of regulation that we make the thing sound and that it is well maintained, and what is unfortunately not everywhere done well. So that has to come. So the pipes has to come, the plants has to come, and that finds all its ways in the DDP. The last point what I want to mention here is the rainwater catchment. I mean, we are blessed here in Auroville, and not only in Auroville, that we have so much rain. That means that catchment is necessary for agriculture, filling the lake, and for gardening. And mind you, about the amount of consumption what we have in Auroville about water, that has no comparison with our neighbors. I mean, it is about 400 liters per person, and that is huge. And mainly that is gardening. So everything what we can bring from treated wastewater and from rainwater into gardening and into agriculture, that will be a minus for groundwater and other resources. So we have to develop this. So this is the main line where we work on at this moment in the council. Well, I have ended. I thought I saw a bit of time, so.
Yeah, if it's good for you like this, Toby, thank you. Dr. Jayanti Ravi, the Secretary of the Auroville Foundation, has joined us just now. So she would like to say a few words. So I will give her the mic and just the camera.
My special regards to all the people who are present today. Good evening and good morning to all of you. I see Harald Kraft. I'm told that you've done some phenomenal work, even the size of the comprehensive work in terms of really harvesting all the rainwater and putting it together for Auroville. We've heard that several times, and we're very, very happy and want to acknowledge the excellent work you have put together. Similarly, we've heard Michael Bonke's name several times. So again, welcome, Michael, to this whole effort that we're all collectively now trying to consolidate and take forward, the desalination bit. But I'm also told you've spoken of certain technical challenges that might come up and possible ways of addressing it. I'm sure when we all earnestly try with full sincerity and faith in the way Mother is guiding all of us on a very spontaneous way as we move through all of this with a raised level of consciousness, with a great deal of sensitivity. I'm sure that will also get sorted out. Anupama has also today, it's very nice that she's brought in the urban perspective, the urban design perspective into it, in keeping with what has been the vision of the Mother, what has come down to us, not only as a galaxy plan, but also the master plan. And now we are at a very exciting phase of actually taking all these papers and plans from a 2-dimensional to a 3-dimensional scale, 1:1. So I think this is a very exciting time. I want to especially acknowledge the wonderful leadership and efforts that TDC, in the midst of a lot of, you see often it's a little ironical that when people don't do any work, they're probably not criticized, but when you start doing things, you also earn the ire of a lot of people. And I think the entire team at TDC has been getting more than its share of all the bouquets and brickbats as well. But I want to acknowledge the work that Toby and the entire team there is putting together. And in that spirit, I think from our side, we also want to share that last week we had some very interesting discussions with the Citizens Assembly group, which has also tried to do some work, because in this entire landscape of Auroville, the ecosystem of Auroville, it's also imperative that we get a buy-in of the community, not that this has to be something which is a bottom-up approach of planning a city, because the population that we have here is hardly 8% of what it ought to be. So the rest of the people are yet to come here, and we want to make ourselves as ready to welcome all of them with the infrastructure, water, all of it in place. But nevertheless, it's imperative that the people that are here are also heard. And I think the Citizens Assembly too did a portion of that work. And we're trying to also see how we can, some of the findings from there, how they can be plowed in so that we have a water policy which builds on what Harald has done. And there has also been some more work after that. What was the name of the gentleman who worked? Kusta as well.
Harald would know.
Harald would probably know. These are new names for me, new people, you know, but I was happy that you might have different approaches, but if there's a way of synthesizing some of the good elements of all these approaches and come up with something which is also very contemporary, very futuristic, and yet which really is in line with the philosophy, the direct action, the spirit of what Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given us. So I want to really thank all of you. And I think in the coming weeks and months, we're going to see some fantastic developments here. TDC, already we are in the process of putting together several plans, about 5 of them, which are ready more or less for execution, for which the DDPs are ready, including the residential zone 1 and 2, the line of goodwill, and many such, the Southern Service Node, and then the fecal sludge management. And of course, water is a critical, the water, high tension infrastructure cables, and also the OFC low tension. So all of these are things that are all in the pipeline, and they have been given an endorsement and approval and funding also by Government of India. So some of these projects, not the residential ones. So we are poised at a very exciting, interesting moment where a lot of these things in the 150th birth anniversary year of Sri Aurobindo are actually going to take off on the ground. So I think the next coming weeks, months, and years ahead are going to be very special. And I want to especially acknowledge and invite all of you to be very actively involved. So I was also thinking that if we could have fora or forums such as these at a periodicity of maybe a quarter or so, where we can again exchange not just for the knowledge of the general public, general community here, but also some kind of technical discussions to see if the manner in which things are being implemented, if there is any course correction, if there is any addition value add, technically from the point of view of the experts, the knowledge body that you all represent can also be plowed into it, folded into it. So on that note, I think I'll stop here, and I think there are some questions and answers, and we look forward to that. And let's hope that this year, which is the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo, really sees all of us moving ahead with a lot more energy, with a lot more momentum, and also trying to consolidate and get in greater harmony, where I know that sometimes when we start, there is a lot of reaction. I often talk to our team members also of something called the Rama mantra. I don't know if you've all heard of it, but where there's any new impetus to take something forward, it usually meets with a lot of rejection. People respond with a lot of apprehensions and rejection of the idea. But when we persist, because there is some solid merit in it, and we really feel from the core of our being that this is something driven by something far more bigger, far more important than us, and when we push for it even more, then the next reaction that it usually gets is anger. So you first start with a rejection, and then it evokes a lot of anger. But a lot of people give up or give in and just stop things there. But I think because we are not doing this for any other agenda, but for really seeing that dream which inspired Mother, and she gave it to us as a special gift and 54 years ago. So in that spirit, when we move forward and continue with this, I think a very, very good point of inflection comes when this rejection and anger then metamorphoses into mellowing, and finally there is acceptance. So any decision, any negotiation, whether it happens within a household, in a community, in a big country, or the world, does usually go through these life stages. So we may be at the R and A stage somewhere, but I'm sure there is an M and an A, the Rama, waiting to accept all these efforts that the team members are so diligently, with so much of commitment, passion, and of course devotion to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo trying to implement. So on that note, again, want to thank Vladimir and the Center La Grace Radhe as well for always being a solid centers of support to really bring in a lot of energy into these webinars that we're doing. Thank you again, and over to Joel.
Thank you, Madam, for these very positive and encouraging words. We have a few questions. We have something like 20 minutes to go through them. But before I go for the question, do you have any urgent remark or comment to do about what has been shared so far, dear panelists? Or shall I start with the first question? All good?
Let's start with the questions.
Okay. So we receive a question by email before the webinar. So Auroville is founded on Paleocene. I don't know what that is. The land is having alternative layers of clay sand, having inherent salinity. No big river nearby, so dependent on rainfall. For future, all sweet waters have to be saved. Overdrawing of groundwater will create salinity increase. So rainwater harvesting, roof harvesting, and recycling of water are the present solution till seawater treatment plant is established. Will you suggest any other method or device to solve future water problem? From Parashar Divwedi from Baroda. Who would like to answer?
I, of course, have an alternative approach that is desalination. Harald would go for rainwater harvesting. Actually, the big problem which will come is synchronizing the different approaches. I remember Toby told me once that in Holland, separation of so-called gray water and drinking water is prohibited by law. And this is the big question. We have rainwater harvested water, which is no drinking water. And Harald's approach, and he was a pioneer in that in Berlin, was to separate gray water and drinking water, and then you get your toilet flushed with gray water, but in the kitchen tap you have drinking water. Now there is a reason why this is prohibited in Holland, because especially if I think in Auroville, then a plumber comes and he has to repair something, and afterwards you get your toilet water from the kitchen tap and the other way around and all that. So at a certain point of time, we have to have a design. What do we do with the rainwater harvested water? What do we do with the desalinated water? And it may be more feasible to purify the rainwater harvested water, bring it to drinking water level, and then have only one water distribution system? Or is it better to have two systems, gray water parallel to drinking water? And there we have to do quite some planning work and see how we match the different sources. And the third source, wastewater treatment, that also comes in. So as I said, if we have an area north of Matrimandia in the Greenbelt where we want to put the hill, and then there we have our treatment plants, and from there we distribute it. There we have storage lakes in addition to the Matrimandia lake. That would be a big work which still lies ahead of us.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody would like to add something to?
Maybe I can just add one comment.
Okay, let me just turn the camera.
I would just like to add one comment here, is that if we imagine the future of water in dense urban areas, then the prospect of using wastewater treatment plant, I think what Michael mentioned, I think is the way forward, to separate plumbing and to not have expensive tanks to clean all levels of water, mix them up, and then have large expensive tanks, but keep the clean water for certain source, clean a little bit more and use it for the very clean uses, and the wastewater treatment plant water to keep it for irrigation perhaps, and to reduce the cost of treatment plants through different separated plumbing. And if we rely seriously on water produced by wastewater treatment plants, then we will see this as a reliable source. Monsoon happens once in a while, whereas what you get from the wastewater treatment plant is almost every day the same. If you see it as a source, it's almost the same amount every day. And if one sees the future of farming as urban farming as integrated systems in the building plumbing, then the water that you use from the treatment plant from that area goes back into the building, and maybe facades and roofs have got urban farming integrated, but the water that comes back from the urban farming keeps on getting used there, as opposed to when you grow your food elsewhere, because when you water it, it just goes back into the ground. So I don't know, these are certain ideas I've seen, and I was waiting for further opportunities to interact with Harald since we last interacted. So hopefully we'll be able to explore these.
Yeah, Harald, maybe first, and then Toby.
I would like to comment on the difficulties of having two different qualities of water in the house. In 1987 in Berlin, during the International Building Exhibition, we have a plot of houses, a group of houses supplied with two kind of water supply lines, one for drinking water quality and one for reused water quality, just to flush the toilets, to save about 30% of the water supply. Today, we are building rainwater harvesting systems in Berlin new settlements. For example, we have constructed a rainwater cistern with a length of 130 meters. We are collecting the rooftop runoff of these houses, and we purify the water with a simple technology, and we bring the water back into the households for flushing the toilets and for irrigation. So there is no danger for a hygiene risk for the people. The technology is very simple. And the rainwater harvesting and reuse will become more popular now because of the water problems arising, even in a place like Berlin. We have only almost 600 millimeter rainfall only, and in a minimum 400 millimeter rainfall. So that is quite a problem in future. So everything in the design, in the development in Berlin is water saving and minimizing water consumption. And of course, treatment of wastewater, purification is expensive, and I would, to my experience, only suggest to use it for irrigation. It has enough nutrients, but if you hygienize it, it is no problem to use it for irrigation. But I would not use it in the households. My comment.
Okay, Toby, and I think Michael also wanted to add something. After
just
Toby.
a few
comments.
First, in Auroville, we have still a long way to go in saving water, not only on a resident consumer level. We have not applied all the technology which can bring the water really a usage quite down. Also in agriculture. I mean, I've seen quite a lot of projects of dry land farming and that kind of things, but there is still a lot to do. So the whole of less usage that we have to explore, and we really have to continue. The other side, and I like what Harald said about the two systems. I come out of a culture where it was forbidden, and there were some tests, and unfortunately, one of those tests went very wrong. So that was also an And of course, I've seen square pipes and red pipes just to make a differentiation between, yeah, this is normal drinking water and this is treated water, rainwater. But nevertheless, you have to build two systems, which is quite expensive, and there is always a problem of mixing the two. So that nevertheless, I'm willing to surrender my thoughts to Harald. If there are systems and they're quite foolproof, then I'm willing to follow it. But I know that the heavy regulations about the hygiene of water is here paramount.
Okay, Toby, you finished?
Yeah.
I'm not so much in favor of having alternative systems. First of all, Auroville has the advantage to be at the sea, and to desalinate water and produce it as and when you need it comes cost-wise, maybe if you really calculate all the costs of the storage facilities, of the rainwater harvesting facilities and everything, desalinated water comes at 10% of the cost of, desalinated water comes at 10% of the costs of rainwater harvested water. And if you harvest it, if you desalinate your water in an environmentally friendly way, then it has, as I mentioned before, the additional advantage that you create more fresh water, which is then replenishing the aquifers. Like if we have 5,000 cubic meter of desalinated water every day at the area of the whole city area, it means over the year as much as if we would add 40% to the rainfall, which also comes into the aquifers. So desalinated water definitely has a lot of advantages, but Harald is of course right that anyway we have 30% of the town area already paved, and from there naturally we have to collect the water and do something with it, and that we have to store then. But I would say if we have a possibility to purify it, which we can do in these pebble banks in the north of the Greenbelt, then it would be much more economic to take the harvested rainwater, purify it, bring it to drinking water level, and then have only one centralized water system where there's only one pipeline going to every household and not two pipelines, and where there is no possibility of mixing up something or interchanging. It will come in the end much more economic. And then with every activity which you do, like having double piping and all this and that, this is everything something which finally is a burden on the environment. These pipes have to be created, they are nickel coated and all this and that. So I think if you calculate it through reasonably, rainwater harvesting for sure 100%, but then I would purify it and mix it with the desalinated water and have only one centralized piping system and not two.
This is a very, it has become a very interesting debate. Harald, if it's possible, could we go to other questions? Maybe we'll organize another webinar to go a bit more in depth. Dr. Jayanti Avi had a very practical question. So
I don't mean to take up too much of time, but one of the things that has often interested me is is there any work done on the design of toilets, because the amount of water that we waste in flushing is often very high. So Auroville being the place where all kinds of experimentation happens, can we think of, or is there something that we can look at? And I also want to acknowledge that last the 22nd of this month, which was the International Water Day, we had a very nice meeting with both the water services team, Luca, Bobby from Auroville, along with the Citizens Assembly team, and of course, TDC, Anupama, Toby, they were all here. So that's just another point. So this is also addressed to that group. Do we have other technologies to create designs of toilets that would consume less water, because flushing may not be a very eco-friendly way of conserving water?
So who would like to? Yeah, Toby, please.
What we see in the last 10, 15 years in getting reduction of the use of water is in washing machines, shower heads, toilets, all kind of heads for taps to reduce water. I remember that the first toilets were about 20, 25 liters in one go. That has gone back to 5, and there are even toilets where no water is used anymore. So that development is going on. That's already for quite some time, but it is one of the main points, technological development, and especially washing machines and shower heads, and I can go endlessly like this, when that starts to become parts of a design of a house, where you see gradually the amount of liters what is used per person going back. But it is not enough. What is additional to this is that you have to constantly communicate that this technology is available, because usually this kind of technology is more expensive, and we see there also a decrease in cost. But nevertheless, if you have to choose between taps and one gives 5 liters an hour and the other one gives 2, then usually the 2 is more expensive. So it has to be communicated. Thirdly, and here's an important point, and that is research, is that when you start asking money for something, it starts to reduce. And that is something we have to learn also here in Auroville, that when there is a tariff on something, that there is a reduction. Sometimes it is not too much, but those 3 things together gives a reduction. But it is mainly the technology. It is mainly the technology.
Okay, Harald, you would like to add something?
Yeah. From the project I mentioned in 1987, in this project, we also established 2 different toilet technologies in order to save water. Since we know 1/3 of the former water consumption was going through the toilet. So one approach was, of course, reducing the amount which goes through the toilet, and the second was using another quality of water to flush the toilet. Now, in this place, we have flushes with stop toilet buttons, which consume about 6 liters minimum. And then we also established in one large building toilets who need only 4 liters for each flush. But then the problem is in the pipe system, because the pipe system requires some fluid in order to transport the solids. So if you flush with too little water, then you get blockage in the pipes. So also, therefore, there has been a technology developed for this building. So 4 liters was absolutely no problem, and the total water consumption dropped down below 100 liters per person. Now, the latest development in projects in Berlin and in Hamburg is, of course, vacuum toilets. Then you need only 1 liter for flushing, but you need a totally different pipe system, which has to be absolutely airtight. You create a vacuum and you draw you push the wastewater to another place. Yeah. Then you only need 1 system of water supply if you have that. But for to get rid of the fecal water, this becomes difficult. And imagine it has to be a perfect sealed system. If there is one little hole in it, that's it. Yeah, then you are stuck with your wastewater. So this is the high tech. What is possible?
Can I
so
quickly?
Very common is the 6-liter flush toilet, and even therefore you can use water quality which is not drinking water quality, which was prohibited in Germany in the past, but now not anymore.
Okay, just quickly. I think if somebody says, okay, we change the toilets and then we use less water, and this is a big progress, it may be so, it may not be so. We are saving so much water now that in Munich around 8 years ago, the whole canalized system collapsed, and they now are pumping water into the pipe system because there is not enough water to transport all the solids and all that. So I think it doesn't matter so much how much you use water in the process of using the toilet. It depends what you do afterwards with the water. So if you anyway purify it and then regain the water, it doesn't matter whether you use 4 liter or 25 liter, because at the end you have the water again. So it's easy to say, let's save water and use less in the process of toilets. But as Harald said, then you have a problem in transporting your solids and all that. So this question has to be addressed in a wider context where you have all the parameters. What are you using? What are you doing with your wastewater? How are you treating it and all that? And then only you can say, does it make sense to use less water in the toilets, or doesn't it make sense? It's not so simple to answer just, okay, less water used is a progress.
Thank you. Shall we take another question? We have a few questions. If you are okay to continue a little further, we can continue.
Of course.
So I have a question of Niketana. Curious about the HDPE sealing of the test lake and how that impacts Harald's research on refilling the aquifer with the lake.
So Harald, that's for you, huh?
Yes. In my practical work, I try to avoid the use of these polyethylene foils. If I can use clay, and I always prefer vacuum condensed clay for sealing. That is my preferable. But if this is not possible, the foil is an option. And in the Matramandir Lake, anyhow, we require a perfect sealing with a minimum of infiltration losses. And the infiltration is not through the lake, it is outside of the lake planned. My risk that I see with the foil is when there is a break, if there is a hole in it, then it's very difficult to trace it, and it does not. The losses can be substantial. When you are able to use a clay sealing, then the clay expands and is able to seal itself. So, but not a polyethylene sheet. Yeah. So when it is very important, you usually do not rely only on one sealant. You try to have at least two ways of sealing. So one can fail, but we will see how that works in the Matamadia test field.
Can I add 2 sentences? HDPE foil is used in Germany at least, but most probably all over Europe, also for the garbage deposits. And there it is absolutely important that nothing goes into the groundwater. And therefore, the legal requirement for HDPE foil is that it has to hold minimum 100 years. And HDPE is a material which doesn't decompose, and it has many, many advantages. For example, root infiltrations from the trees around. If you have clay sealant and all that, you have so many things which you have to observe and where you have to look after. With HDPE foil, what we are using of 2 millimeter thickness, we are very safe, provided, of course, that the seams where we weld the tracks together are 100% secure. And therefore, we are like now, in 2 weeks, a German engineer is coming from Naue, from the supplier of the foils, and he will do the welding of the tracks of foil so that we can be absolutely sure. But if this works fine, then I think HDPE foil is the best choice.
So actually, I think the question is also about how that impacts the refilling of the aquifer, right? So shall I reread the question? So the question is curious about the sealing of the test lake and how that impacts Harald's research on refilling the aquifer with the lake.
It's the same, to seal is to seal.
Yeah? Do you have the feeling that it has been answered?
I have answered that. Yeah.
It has no impact on Harald's concept, because his concept anyway is that there is a zero seepage through the bottom of the lake. So whether it's vacuum compacted clay or HDPE foil, it's the same. Doesn't touch his concept.
Super. Thank you for the clarification. Let's take a question of Tuan. What would a multi-sourcing plan look like? Rainwater harvesting plus use of recycled water plus what is RO water?
Reverse osmosis, that is desalinated water.
Yeah, reverse osmosis water. Yeah. What could be the approximative percentage contribution of each of these components for the township of 50,000 people plus visitors? And there's a second question, follow-up. Irrespective of what the final sourcing plan will be, can the storage and distribution plan be finalized and implemented? That's from Tuan.
Okay, Michael, first. I will answer.
Okay. We have to try all the 3 sources, rainwater, harvested water, desalinated water, and treated wastewater. And then the future will show which one is more economic, which one is more feasible, and then it will go its own way. It's very difficult to predict it. It would look totally different if we would be in a city like Jaipur or in Coimbatore, where there is no sea around. There it would be only rainwater, harvested water. But since we have the sea in front of our doorstep, it's very easy for us to provide desalinated water. And I would say we should aim at 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And then we see where the path leads us to. It will, anyway, we can decide now whatever we want. if later on one of the resources turns out to be much more economic and much more doable, then this resource will take the lead. It will always be all the three, but the composition, how much of this, of that, will be decided after we have all the three components at hand.
Well, till now, I always have the feeling that desalination is, first of all, it's not ecological, and it is an expensive technology. But it has been well developed in the past years, and it is widely used all over the dry countries. So there is absolutely no objection to use it also in Auroville. Yeah, but what we have to know is that the desalinated water is not portable. You have to remineralize the water to make it suitable for human consumption. The brine problem you have explained, Michael, that is a problem which is not to be solved. It can only be minimized. And we should not forget that whatever we get from heaven is desalinized water, and that is free of charge. The only problem is in the high fluctuation between 600 millimeter and 2600 millimeter. This is a supply problem. Now, when we would decide to a safe storage capacity and provide desalinated water instead, then that part of the rainfall which we are not using is running down into the sea. Yeah, and what I would like to remember again is that the Auroville underground, the geology is perfect for storing water, for harvesting water, which cannot be taken by somebody else, and it will not be able to be polluted by salinity. So that is an advantage which only this location has. And right now, most of the water is being drawn from the second aquifer, from the limestone. And that is, everybody has access to, and it is below sea level. So, welcome to desalinated water.
First of all, I think very little water is running into the sea. All the canyons are dammed. And Toby, maybe you can tell us something about it. I don't even think that 5% of the rainfall is really reaching the open sea. And whatever is flowing towards the sea underground is pushing back the salinity. So I don't think that much of the rainfall is lost by going top surface towards the sea. Toby, what is your opinion on that?
Well, one step back before I answer that part. I think from the four resources we have, seawater, rainwater, groundwater, and wastewater, that it is unfortunate that we are not capable of saving that groundwater, because that groundwater is very near to us. It is just where you want to have it. It is of good quality. So it is a pity that they are depleting. If you look at the other three, I agree with you, Michael, that we have to be practical. As soon as the desalinated water comes in, it will go to the residents because it's of good quality and everybody wants good quality of water. That means that other water will be used for other usages. And that will be mainly gardening, agriculture. I'm not talking about industry. That's really a different chapter. If you want to make soft drinks, you need a quite special of water. If you want to clean vegetables, you need also special. That's a different story. But we have to have a practical approach, and that will be mainly when the desalinated water comes in, that you see that the other waters will be pushed. Nevertheless, the most strategic of the three which are still there is the wastewater. Every drop what you use for gardening or for something else, we don't need to pump up and we don't need to desalinate. So the focus should be there. In the water preservation in Auroville, I think that the total runoff is about 0. We have really locked every canyon, every sloping area that has been done by Kerit and by Discipline and who not, where the first thing was making dams to keep the water in. And I think when I saw the last figures, it was close to 0. So the work has been well done there.
Quickly, one thing what Harald said, that desalinated water is not potable. In principle, it is potable. It lacks some microminerals, but usually you let it just run via a chalk block so that it attracts again the minerals of which it is deprived. But I know someone in Köln who is manufacturing desalination plants, and he told me that he's living now since 5 years on demineralized water from desalinated water. So but it's not a problem to remineralize the desalinated water. You just let it run via some marble or chalk or something, and it attracts the minerals of which the water has been deprived in the process of this reverse osmosis.
Okay, so regarding the question of Tuan, it seems that one question was not really answered. Can the storage and distribution plan be finalized and implemented irrespective of the final sourcing mix?
I think that the storage we need in any case, even maybe for desalinated water. If you even have to store desalinated water, you run the plant 24 hours, but you don't use it in the night, or in the monsoon time, you use much less water, but maybe you want to let your plant run still. So I think there is no problem in making a master plan which takes care of all the various options, because we need them anyway. And you make the plan in such a way that it's a little bit flexible. And if later on one of the sources takes the upper hand, then you modify it accordingly. No problem, I think.
One comment to the good news that there is no more runoff from Auroville territory. This is a fantastic news if you have managed to harvest the entire runoff now. But don't forget, now we have 3,000 people living in Auroville. When the city is there, 500 hectares are sealed. Then again, you have runoff, even when it is now covered by the forest. And you also have to clear forest for agriculture. And as it was planned in the master plan, there should be agriculture in the green belt. So that all causes runoff again. And that is what we have calculated.
So, Harald, just a little follow-up on this. Speaking about the runoff, is there, and for everybody, for the question, is there a problem with having open catchment ponds collected from runoff in Auroville?
In general, every open water storage has a problem of maybe being the host of vectors, of mosquitoes. And every Aurovillian who has an ant channel around his house knows it. He has to bring in fish, and the fish have to be able to kill the larva. So you can, of course, create open water storages, but you have to make sure that you don't create a breeding place for mosquitoes. In Auroville, this is very, very dangerous. So that is possible, but you have to design your storages well.
The underground scheme, what Harald had designed and where he made his pre-feasibility study, would be ideal if two things would not happen. First of all, once the aquifer gets saline, then all this is gone. And secondly, we are sharing it, whether we want or not, with all the villages around. We cannot make a wall between the Auroville part of the aquifer and the aquifer of Umeapalayam or Kuleapalayam or whatever. So this is a little bit something which we have to take into consideration when we think of Harald's concept.
One comment to that. If we use the first aquifer, and that was my suggestion, that is quite limited to the Auroville territory. And all the others are using the second aquifer, as the Aurovillians are doing it now. So that is the common aquifer, but not the first aquifer. That is very limited below Auroville. But the problem is you have to live clean because you are living on your water storage if you use only the first aquifer.
But the first aquifer is definitely connected to the second, and there are so many perforations. There are hundreds of bore wells which go right through from the first to the second. So I think this would have been an option if one would have been very, very careful from the very beginning and would have really limited to the use of the first aquifer. But I think now that's too late.
Well, the good point is, even if you have drilled through the into the second aquifer, when you are not using it and when there is no pipe in it, then it will clog itself. It will seal itself after some time. You will definitely lose some of the water, but I don't think that it will be substantial because the holes you poke into the ground are not more than 20 or 30 centimeters. So
but how many bore wells, Toby, you have run the water service, how many bore wells are in the city area of Auroville? What is your estimation? It must be more than 300.
In the city area are 80, 90 bore wells, something like this, or even 105, but not all are functioning, and they are very different. Some are used for agriculture, and some have only a windmill, so you cannot compare all the bore wells. I knew once the figure of how many bore wells went really from the first to the second aquifer, and I remember also that there are tables in that famous research of Kootstra, where he calculated how much water seeps from the first to the second aquifer. I don't have the numbers here now in front of me, but it was quite substantial, that I remember. And if you look at the aquifers, it is Auroville is only 2.5% of the total surface of the aquifers. I mean, if you expand it to the, what we then say bioregion, but the whole area what covers underneath by the aquifers, there are 5,500 bore wells. I mean, it's completely uncontrollable what has happened there.
Okay, this is very interesting.
Yes.
Shall we take one last question from Niketana? She's saying, I'm curious to hear more about how Michael aims to reduce the three environmental issue he highlighted about the desalination plants.
She wants to hear how I want to reduce what?
To reduce the
environmental. Okay.
Issues. Yeah.
Okay. The three issues are that energy should be green energy, because the main effort for or the main resource which is required for desalination is electricity, to put pressure on the water to press it through the membrane. Now we are intending to use an energy regain system, ERS, and that means when we build up the pressure, then we have first water in front of the foil, which has a salt content of 4.5%. That is the salt content of the seawater. Then when we press it through the membrane, the salt content will increase. When it reaches 6.5%, we would have to have such a high pressure that it makes no sense anymore. We have to release the brine and bring in fresh seawater. And when this brine is released, we let it run through a turbine and regain from there the electricity which we have utilized to build up the pressure. So actually, most of the electricity which we need is regained. So we come to a electricity consumption of between 2.5 to 3 kilowatt hour per cubic meter fresh water. And this electricity, on top of it, of course, we will use 100% green energy, either from solar or from wind power. So the energy question as harming the environment, I think we are solving it 100%. The second question is that you usually use chemicals. The main reason why you use chemicals is that the living elements, the plankton, the algae, all that in the water, it clogs the membrane. If you don't do anything, then after some time the membrane is clogged and you have to exchange it. Now, in the usual desalination plants, they add chlorine to kill these living elements and flake them out. We don't do that. We lead the seawater which we take in through a quartz pipe, which lets UV light pass, and we expose it to heavy UV light, and we kill the micro living organisms with UV light. And then we have an ultrafiltration system that is basically a filter, like a water filter, where we filter it out. And this way, the only chemicals what we use is that every 2-3 weeks one washes the ultrafiltration with a little bit of soap. So we use no chemicals at all. And the third one is that one has to calculate that you dispose the brine which you lead back into the open sea in such a way that it cannot form a carpet on the floor. So on the floor of the sea or on the bed of the sea. Now Toby has made bathymetric studies running around with the boats in front of our beach, and we have a very clear picture what is the current from where it comes, where it goes, and we can calculate where do we have to discharge the brine and how much maximum per hour, so that it mixes immediately with the seawater, and this effect is close to zero, that it stifles the living organisms in the underground. For example, we are planning of disposing the brine 500 meters inside the sea, and only 5,000 cubic meter per day we are desalinating. Now, if you compare the Chennai plant, they dispose it only 200 meters, and they are disposing 500,000 cubic meter on one day. So this is a totally different ball game. So one of the purpose of creating the desalination plant, which is maybe even more important than bringing fresh water to Auroville, is to have it as a model plant, which is totally environmentally friendly. And when the salinity will hit the coastline, which is only a question of time, it's not a question yes or no, it's a question of time. When the salinity hits the coastline, then we can propose and say, okay, here you see, we have a small plant, which is 100% environmentally friendly, which is working in a very economic way. And then one can multiply it, every small community or small town, Kadalur, this, that, they could adopt this system and have small plants for each community or big village, rather than having these mega plants which will destroy all the marine life. And desalination plants anyway will come, since it is much cheaper than rainwater harvesting. You can tell the cities 100 times, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? In the end, they will take the cheapest method. And then at least if we can propose them an environmental friendly technology to do desalination, then that has some value for India as such.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Harald. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Anupama. I suggest that we close the seminar, the webinar here. Probably there will be some follow-up in the near future. I suggest just to take one moment of silence to thank Mother and Aurobindo for accompanying us in our new journey of new impulse of building the city. And I thank you also our audience and our partners of La Grasse Center, Vladimir and Rade. And just a moment of silence then. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.